Hi modelers, it's been a while since I did a video, so I thought I'd do another one. A friend asked the other day how I do tissuing. So I've got a Hawker Fury here, it's a Dennis Bryant design, and I'm going to tissue the rear of it, I'm going to tissue the wings and all the other open structures. I'm then going to try something that I've not done before, and that's silk over tissue. The process was invented by Pete McDermott, very famous modeller in the UK, one of the Lords of Scale, and an idol to me, and an idol to a lot of people. So what I plan to do is to show you how I apply tissue. It's not the only way, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. I just have my way. It seems to work, and I'll show you how I do that. It's very simple, it's very quick. Then once I've done that, I'll show you how to then apply silk over the top of it. Pete McDermott's idea was to apply the silk over the tissue using wallpaper paste. Wallpaper paste, when it evaporates, is nearly all water, and it leaves a very light finish, much lighter than if you'd attached the silk with dope. So this is the process I'm going to show you how to do. Okay, without further ado, let's go over to the workbench and get started. Okay, the session we're going to do now, I'm going to cover this tailplane. This is from the Dennis Bryant Hawker Fury Mark 1. Okay, now before I start, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what I'm using. Okay, so we have here some 4021 silk from Harrington's. It's about 14 grams per square metre, and is very similar to Asaki silk. Asaki silk is getting very hard to find indeed. It's not made anymore, so you're going to struggle to get it. This is made by Harrington Silk, and we'll see how well it compares. Also, we have some, I would say, a medium weight tissue. It's not silk span, it's not anything special, it's just a fairly standard tissue. It doesn't seem to be shinier on one side than the other. Some of them are, and you have to apply them all the same way round. So if you've got shiny side out, stick to shiny side out, it changes the look of the paint. So that's what we're going to apply. We're going to apply silk over tissue. Okay, so some other materials I've got here that you might want to see. So I've got some 50/50 dope, nitrate dope, some wallpaper paste. As you can see, it's fairly runny. Okay, I mixed it yesterday, hopefully it'll be alright. Then I've got in here, that's cellulose dope, nitrocellulose dope, and that's neat, that's full strength. Okay, then in this one here we have some dope thinner. This is what I call my first pass. So it's a small amount of dope thinner that I put the brush in first to get most of the dope off. Then once that's had a good swilling around in there, then I use a larger quantity, another pot of thinners. That is for getting the residue off. That way I'm only ever wasting, you know, a small pot of it. And what I tend to do with the thinners is actually add it into the 50/50 dope or into the full strength dope, because over time it thickens up and becomes a little bit too thick. So I use the waste, the waste from the first pass pot into my thinners, into my dope. One of the other things I use to prepare the airframe for finishing is I use some sanding sealer. This one is made by 5 Star. In fact, all my dope that I'm using today is from Starspan or 5 Star. Sanding sealer, you can make your own. It is just dope with some talcum powder in it, or some sawdust if you want to use some balsa sawdust, something like that. But some people prefer sawdust because it doesn't leave such an oily finish as talcum powder does. It's not really oily, but it seems to be an oily finish if you're going to apply paint straight over the top of the tissue. First of all, I've applied a coat of sanding sealer over the whole airframe, all the edges and any areas where the tissue will touch the airframe. So the first thing we need to do before we proceed is we need to give it just a light tickle down with sandpaper, just to knock the edges off. That sanding sealer, it makes quite a difference. So you know, it's well worth doing. So there we have pretty much I'm going to start with the underside, and I've labelled T for the top, so I'm going to start with the underside. And that's the side I just sanded, I hope. Yes, it is. Right, so that's tickled that down. Okay. So here's the surface we're going to work on. Let's get the silk out of the way. Okay, so first of all, we take our tissue. I've placed it on top of the surface with the creases rising up, so it doesn't really matter which way down it is, but I prefer to sort of have the edges or the ends down so that the rest can be forced down. So for this we're going to use full strength. Ooh, if I can open it, it's glued shut. Full strength dope, and I'm going to use a small brush. Okay, it might be worth talking just briefly about brushes. For when I'm doping, I tend to use two brushes. One smaller brush, this is, I don't know, about 1/2 inch wide, I use for applying the dope around the edges and over the airframe and sticking the edges down. Once I want to actually put a final coat on, then I use this quite expensive Daler-Rowney short flat brush. It's a bit solid at the moment. It has been cleaned, but obviously not cleaned thoroughly enough. But the minute you put it straight back into the cellulose thinners or into the dope, it'll soften straight up. Okay, so applying the tissue to this tailplane. First of all, we lay out the tissue over the area that we want to cover, and then we take a bottle of water. This is just Miracle Hair water bottle, but it has a very fine atomizer on the top, so I've just got water in it. So what we do first is we spritz it generously all over. Okay, nice generous spritzing. Okay, then the secret of this is to work quite quickly. So pull it out lengthways, and then pull it out fore and aft, and make sure it's down around all the edges, nice and tight. Not tight, but taut, shall we say. Okay, then I like to take my my dope, okay, and I just go straight through. Let me lift this up so you can actually see what's going on. I go straight through the tissue around the edges and just daub it on all the way around. Now the trick to this is to go very quickly. Okay, so just daub it on, don't worry. Okay, and you'll find you can just tease it out as you go. Okay, I'm going to just quickly daub it along the middle there and along this section here. It dries very quickly, even through the water. Then daub it along the back, trailing edge, or the leading edge in this case. And bring it forward, just tighten it a little bit. You'll see there's a wrinkle there, so just tease it out. Now, one of the tricks to this is to not let it dry out. So as it's taking a bit longer, because I'm talking to you at the same time, so I'm just spritzing a bit more water on it. And I'll put a bit more. Do you see how I'm just teasing it out? If you find there's an area that, like there, that it just needs teasing out, put more dope on it and you can lift it and pull it. Okay? The addition of the dope, the fresh application of dope, just dissolves the dope underneath, and you can reposition and retension. So just daub it right around the edge. So you just want to get the perimeter at this time. Okay, and keep teasing it out so that there's no wrinkles. Okay, that's one side done, or one end done. I'm just going to continue with the other side. The other side, I suppose, other end. So again, this is full strength dope. Just dab it on all the way around the edge, straight through the wet tissue. Sometimes it'll go white. This dope doesn't seem to do that. But so you can see there the tissue is drying a little bit and it's just wrinkling a little bit. So keep just tensioning it, and then more dope all the way around the edge. If it seems to be drying, then just add a little bit more water. The other reason for the sanding sealer that we put on right at the start was to seal the balsa. This makes the water that we've atomized on, misted on, it stops it from lifting the grain of the wood too much. So I don't know whether you can see it, but there's a very slight wrinkle there, so I'm just teasing it out a little bit along that back edge there and there. So I'm not sure if you can, how much of this you can actually see on the video, but it's all looking pretty good. It would probably help if I actually put my glasses on, but a bit like the blind leading the blind here, isn't it really? So let's make sure I've got some on the edge of that. Now the beauty of using tissue now is that the shrinking isn't really done with the dope. It is to a certain extent, but that's not the primary force when it comes to shrinking. The primary force is actually the water. Oop. Try not to drop it or break it. So as it dries, the tissue shrinks, and it's that water shrinkage that does most of the work. If you look just here, you'll see that there's a wrinkle. Now I can't pull that out, okay? So what you do, just take a little bit of dope and you go over that area, it softens what's underneath and allows you to just gently lift it and put it back down again. Okay, a bit more along there. I'm not sure whether you're getting this on the camera. Just allows you to reposition it. Now, if you're used to using tissue paste and that sort of stuff, well, you'll know that that is not something you can do with tissue paste, unfortunately. Now, you don't have to use dope to soften it back up again. You can use thinners. There's another area here. This is what happens when you work on your model without actually wearing glasses. So I've just put some more dope on there, which will soften it up. You can lift it back off and pull the wrinkles out. There's another section there. Actually, I've done a really rubbish job here, but that's probably perfect for this example. So again, just lift it up. It will come off again. And there you go, and you can just pull it back down. Now what you have got to be careful of is that the tissue is drying, and that's why you're seeing wrinkles. Okay, so have a good look over it. There's an area here that looks a bit iffy. So it's not usually this bad, but I think what I've done is I've let the area dry out a little bit too much. I like to keep it wet. But this is quite a complex part of the model to cover in one piece like this. So I'm just going to quickly go around the whole area at the end. And as you can see, you can lift it then and put it back down. Thinners will do it in a quicker way. So you've lifted all the tissue off, look, and then you can put it all back down again. So we'll absorb some more dope back through. And don't be afraid to dive in with your fingers either, because actually rubbing with your finger like that over the surface is an excellent way to get the tissue to sit down nice and flat. Okay, now we have a little bit of a wave in here. Now I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure it will, that that's probably going to go with as the tissue itself shrinks. Okay, just getting this stuff down on the edges that I've missed. This is typical of any demonstration video, isn't it? Every piece I've done over the last few days has gone absolutely faultlessly with no real problems. This one, of course, just for the camera, is playing silly things. Right, I can see another little area there that that needs some attention. Can you see it just there? So I'm just going to apply a little bit more dope to that area there. Hopefully you can see it. I'll lift it, it comes off, and then I can pull it and lay it back down again. That's had a knock on to this bit here, so I'll lift that as well and pull that wrinkle out a bit more there. A bit more dope on the brush, daub it through, smooth it out with my thumb. And that, for now, is how we'll leave it. so we set that aside. Close up our dope. Go through our phases of rinsing. So first of all, the brush goes in the first pass pot of thinners. This gets the majority of it off. Then we go to the second pass pot, which has got the clean thinners in it. To remove the last bit. Okay, so we'll give that 10 minutes to dry, and then we'll be right back. Well, it's been an hour or so. I went for a walk, and in the meantime the tissue is completely dry. The slight ripple that was in here is gone, and the one in this corner has also gone. So even though it was fighting back a little bit, it's behaved, and it's fine. Okay, so before I go any further, because as you can see, all I've done is literally stick the edges down, just the edges. I've not wrapped it round or done anything else yet. So what I do at this point, take a good, nice, sharp pair of scissors, and I just trim round. Not close, but you know, within about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch to the edge of the structure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the tissue right round the leading edge by about 1/8 of an inch. Probably should be using metric these days, but there you go, 2 or 3 millimeters. So I'm going to leave a little bit more around this thick section, because I'm going to wrap it around so that it wrap it around so that it can do a little bit of this balsa area here. Okay, so just take it off at the corners and 2 or 3 millimeters out all the way around. Right around the tip. Chamfer it off at the tip so that you're right up against the wood, right at the point. Again, 1/8 of an inch where the wood is thin, and then good 1/4 of an inch where it becomes thicker. You get the idea anyway. Okay, so we've trimmed around the edges, got rid of all the waste. So now we're going to take, I think I'm probably going to use the full strength dope for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick down all the edges. Okay, so I'll only show you a bit of this. Our brush has gone hard, so just dip it into the dope to soften it back up again. Okay. Remember, don't worry about getting dope on your fingers. It's lovely to scratch off later. It really is. You've not lived unless you've scratched dope off. Right, so where are we going to start? I'll start and do a curved bit because that's the hardest bit, and then we'll maybe break away and I'll do some more before we start the tape again. Right, so round the edge. So let's get it onto the tissue and then wrap it right round. Okay. It won't go, it won't stick, but once the tissue's sodden, take your finger, start on the outside, go backwards and forwards, and then wrap round the edge. Okay, keep going. And I don't know whether you can see that, but it dries quite quickly and it's stuck. Okay. So we'll keep going. I'll do a bit more so you can see exactly what's happening. So all the way along the edge. get the tissue nice and sodden. You can try to make it go round the back, but it won't, undoubtedly. So when you've got plenty on there, get your finger, rub it down, and then rotate the workpiece and your finger around to the back side and the tissue, as you can see, it's now stuck down. Okay, so that's what we do. I'll do this last bit, so just dab it on, make sure the tissue's wet, brush down, rub your finger along the dope, make sure you've got it no creases or wrinkles, and then wrap your finger while sliding it up and down round the surface to be covered. And there you go. That is dry already. Okay, there's a little bit to do at this tip, which I didn't do at the beginning, so I'll just do that. I've no idea whether I'm actually too close to the camera here. And there you have it. Okay, so I'll show you another bit. I'm just going to do this corner here so you can see what happens on another interesting bit. So in this case, I'm going to put the dope inside where the tissue is going to get folded into, and then I'll just turn the tissue down and dab it down. You can do it with the brush, but I find the finger's a much better way of doing this. Do you see what I mean? The brush sort of will tamp it down, but the warmth of your finger is really good for pressing and drying at the same time. So you will see there, hopefully, that it's not dry yet, but it's getting there. You can get your finger in, but don't worry about getting it on your fingers. It's great stuff, and then you can spend hours picking it off the fingers later. Okay, and then into this bit here, right into the corner. Okay, and you can feel it. It suddenly gets really tacky, like gum, just as it's going off. And that's, just give it the last little press down. Okay, and that's that bit done. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll keep going right round the edge of this, and then and we'll stop the tape, and then you'll, because I think you've got the idea. And welcome back. The whole tailplane, well, the lower surface of the tailplane has now been completely stuck down all the way around the edges. So all of the returns are all now wrapped round and rubbed down with the finger. And it's lovely and taut. It's not very strong, I'll hasten to add. If you were to press onto the covering anywhere, or catch it, or put it down on top of something, you'll rip that. It is very lightweight. Well, it's not, it's a medium weight tissue, but it is just tissue paper. Okay. So the next step is to do the other side. Okay. So it's quite important. It's not so important with a structure as sturdy as this, but if you were doing a very small, lightweight indoor model, then you would take the other side to the same state, okay, to try and minimize warps. And then once you've got the other side in the same state, then you would, each step you would do to both sides as you progress, because you don't want to warp things. Now if I just look down that has a very slight curve in it, which is just developed simply by the water shrinking of that. There's more shrinking to do yet, and when I've done the other side and got that stuck down, all the way around the edges and what have you. Then we'll take the spritzer bottle and we'll coat the whole thing in water again. This time, if it's a very small, lightweight structure that is at risk of warping, then you'll pin it down while the water dries. Okay? And then when it's fully dry, in probably about half an hour to an hour, then you can lift it back up off the board and have a look at it. Okay, so that's it for now. I'll do the other side. I shan't bother to to film all of that. You've seen one bit, you've seen it all. However, I might leave the video running in the background just so I can take snippets from it and show you as we progress. Okay. Okay, just to show you once more. Tissue over size. Spritzer bottle. Tease it out. And there we are. That's how it should have gone on the first side. We'll just set that aside to dry now, and then we'll trim the edges and wrap it round. Okay, welcome back. The edges have all been sealed and glued down with full strength dope, so all is now good. So what we do now, we do to both sides at the same time, because the last thing we want to do is put a warp in it. It's not so critical on this, as I said earlier, because it's quite a substantial structure, but if you were doing this on a smaller free flight or indoor model, then you need to be very careful, to the point of which you'd have to pin this down while it dries just to make sure. So all we're going to do is take our spritzer bottle with some just plain water in it and just give it just a light dusting this time, not the heavy dusting that we gave it the first time. Okay, so that's it. We do that, and then we simply stand it on something so that it dries on both sides at the same time, and then we leave that for a while. Okay, so in about an hour, hour and a half, I will return and we shall continue. Alright, well, we're back. Both sides have shrunk really nicely, and everything is looking a-okay. And the slight bow has gone. It's nice and straight. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to put the 50-50 dope on. Now, there seems to be a little bit of a difference of opinion as to how many coats of dope you put on here. The idea is we're going to put wallpaper paste on here, which is mainly water, and you don't really want the water sagging the tissue too much. So the idea is that you should really waterproof the tissue, and that's probably going to take about 3 coats, so 3 coats on each side. So I'll do 1 coat, flip it over, do the other coat, then I'll let it dry, then do the 2nd coat on both sides, and then the 3rd coat on both sides. When I did a test piece yesterday, I only gave it 1 coat, and sure enough it did sag when I put the paste on. However, it wasn't really a big issue. It did recover quite happily, so 1 coat of dope is probably enough. But to be safe and to see what the difference is, I'm going to put 3 coats on. Okay, so I'll show you the first coat, or a bit of the first coat, and then we'll close down the camera and I'll finish it, and then you can rejoin me in a few minutes, because this tape is getting, or this video is getting awfully long. Right, so this is a lovely brush for this. This is why I use such a large brush, because a nice slow straight pull, and I'm not sure whether you can see it, actually goes from one end to the other and gives it one nice coat. Okay, normally with a small brush you'd be scrubbing backwards and forwards with it, but a nice brush like this, which is about 15 pounds worth of brush, means that it carries sufficient load that it'll go from one end to the other. Okay, now you might think that's a thick coat, but it's not, because of the way it's running through the bristles of the through the brush. What you really don't want to do, and that's unusual, these brushes rarely shed a bristle, but right, so I shall continue in the same vein. What this talks about is what's called the meniscus approach to putting the dope on, and the idea is that the dope flows from the brush onto the surface, sits there and doesn't actually go through. Now the way that the books all say to do this is to actually lay a piece of cloth on the surface, or a piece of kitchen wipe or something like that, and you pour the dope onto the kitchen wipe while you're wiping it across. That'll do the same thing as this, and what it's encouraging is the dope to sit on the top in the meniscus film that it forms, and not go through the tissue and sit under it or sag in the middle. It becomes really important when you're working with silk, because silk is so porous that quite often it'll just go straight through the silk and it'll form puddles, and they really look unsightly. So and if you're working on a nice model where you want the finish to be the final finish, i.e. clear or something like that, then having unsightly splodges of which clearly looks like runs on the inside of the model is really horrid. But there you go, you can probably see already that's drying off pretty quickly, and that's a nice coat on there. Now whether I go to do the 3, I don't know. I'll take a call on it once I've finished the rest of it. But I think you're getting the idea there. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do the whole lot. I'll also go right around the edge again, probably with a smaller brush, just to make sure I've got the edges, although they are pretty well sealed. Okay, so I'll stop the camera now and join you again in a few minutes. There we have it. I've put 2 coats on. That seems to be enough for me, to be perfectly honest. So we'll just go with the 2 coats, and then the next video, part 2, will show applying silk.